We're very conscientious on the level of quality control. It's good to have a more easygoing and formal way of working, so you can have young and less experienced people just making things happen. So rendering is a way of completing the design, but it's also the way of communicating your design to audiences, even to yourself, because I don't think you know what you're proposing if you only have some pencil sketches.
Hello, Architect Nation, and welcome back. This is the right place for you if you run a small architectural practice. On today's episode, you'll discover why the founder of Parametricism believes most architects are leaving money and innovation on the table, and how he's using capitalism to fund creativity at Zaha Hadid Architects. The behind-the-scenes business strategy that lets one of the world's most radical design firms operate profitably in China, the Middle East, and beyond, without sacrificing artistic control. What no one is telling your recent grads, the hard truth about architectural education, why it's failing future entrepreneurs, and the real-world skills Patrik says are missing. In today's episode, I finally sit down with the fantastic Patrik Schumacher, principal of Zaha Hadid Architects and one of the world's leading voices in contemporary design. From pioneering parametricism to shaping the dialogue on architecture's future in the metaverse, Patrik's work pushes boundaries and redefines what's possible. And now a word from our sponsor.
Today's episode is sponsored by Gelt. Is your architecture firm just filing taxes or actually using them to grow the business? Gelt is your partner in optimizing your taxes so you can focus on scale. They work with you year-round, not just at tax time, taking a proactive approach that combines expert CPAs and powerful technology. From smart entity structures to overlooked deductions and smarter compensation planning, Gelt helps architecture firms unlock strategies most accountants miss. And exclusively for Business of Architecture listeners, Gelt is offering 10% off your first year. Don't wait for next tax season. Schedule your complimentary consultation at joingelt.com. That's JOINGELT.com to learn more and mention BOA when you sign up.
Patrik, welcome to the Business of Architecture. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Good to meet you.
Excellent. A pleasure to have you on the show. You are one of the most influential figures in contemporary architecture. You're the principal of Zaha Hadid Architectures, a purveyor of parametricism. You've advanced an architectural agenda which is very much rooted in complexity and computation, and has challenged the very ideological underpinnings, if you like, of the profession. So a pleasure to have you on the show. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. I like a lot of the things that you say. Sometimes it's often met in the architectural press with a bit of controversy, but from a business perspective, here at Business of Architecture, we're very much capitalists and pro-capitalism, and very much kind of on a mission here to have architects become entrepreneurial and really relish and be leaders of business and talk financially and talk powerfully in the world of money, because you become much more of a strategist and the doors begin to open. So I'll start with my first question with how do you position this relationship between business and architecture in your own professional career?
I think most entrepreneurs are actually in it for to change the world, to make impact, to leave legacy, and to enjoy the ride. And of course, we want to live well as well, and we have to provide everybody who's participating wants to reap also the benefit of this. But I would say this is the relationship. The business side is supporting the mission, let's say. And that's the way I certainly look at this. But I also want to obviously have the resources to invest in research, to invest in our people, and also, look after myself and my family too.
How do you feel that architectural firms can scale and innovate whilst remaining profitable and kind of creatively autonomous inside of the industry? And again, it's something that you at Zaha Hadid Architects have done very well. You've managed to have a company which is been pushing the boundaries consistently of what's actually possible as architecture whilst being a profitable business.
Yes, I mean, we innovate, I think, both on the level of the product and what we deliver for clients as a service, and particularly the results the venues we create, which have a new level of quality compared to what competitors maybe deliver or what the client had previously. So that's very important, of course, and that will have value for clients, in particular if that is something not many competitors can deliver to the same level with the same confidence. And we also had, of course, learned to deliver these projects. I mean, we had ideas for a long time, and then we also learned how to deliver them on time, on budget, and satisfy clients, but always do something novel, something innovative, which the client can, which uplifts the client's life process or the life of their customers or those who they're hosting, the events they're hosting. So that innovative element is very, very important. And that is also something we enjoy, but that is also something which has business value. That's what we've realized. And we realized that, of course, you need clients who have ambitions too, who want to project their organizations in the world with something notable. And we need markets which flourishing, growth markets. That's also important to note, because if you have stagnation like we have currently in Europe for the last 15 years, it's hard to grow a business. Then also the business stagnates. And for a company like us, it's actually important to grow because we are maturing with we started young and we're growing old and we can do more, and we stay together, and we need to keep bringing in fresh blood, and everybody who has been there for a long time can do more and have larger teams and overlook more projects. So we have a sense of progress and development, and give me also room for new talent to grow. We need to grow as a company. We do that. We don't necessarily have to grow as breakneck and rapidly as we've grown in the years up to 2008. But we need a kind of relatively steady growth, and that's tough if the economies stagnate. And we were very lucky to have a wonderful ride, as it were, in China and now in the Middle East, in various places and countries, Europe up to 2009 and not much afterwards. So and it's important for a company like us. We really have to operate globally, because there's always something going under, something going into crisis, something happening, conditions changing, projects are being lost. So we need to be really around the world to not be having all eggs in one basket. And that's what helped us to survive and keep growing. Even major setbacks like the 2008 crisis, we actually could continue nearly with the same scale we had up to that point.
What does the business development activities look like inside your firm? Is it largely competition work, or do you have like a business development team who's actively kind of doing intel and research? And you kind of mentioned there as well that one way of sort of diversifying your portfolio has been doing it geographically. So if Europe is stagnating, you've got activity happening in Far East or in the Middle East.
Yeah, we have a very strong group of directors who've been with us for many years and have delivered and make contacts, are speaking at conferences, going to real estate fairs and so on, and have a track record. So they're going around, of course, the board members as well, going around the world, making contacts, speaking, meeting people. And that's happening, there's a group of over 20. Plus, we have a specialized team of acquisition where we're scanning what's out there through websites, and we're also receiving through that central point let's say inquiries. And so we're putting out these RFQs continuously. So every Monday morning we have a new business meeting where we're discussing the new leads, the new potentials. Most of them are competition. There's hardly anything which is a direct commission, even from private clients. So we're looking at all these competition opportunities, maybe anywhere between 5 and 10 new leads per week to come in, to vet, to follow up, to then apply to be put on a short list and then run the competitions. That is usually what we're doing. And the success rate of, first of all, to get onto the short list is a certain success rate, quite high on the majority of shortlists we're getting on. And then the win rate once we're on could be about 25%, roughly 20 to 30%, depending on region. We're quite popular in China, for instance, where we're doing a lot of wins.
So is that quite expensive then?
Well, I mean, obviously they're also delivering projects at the same time. But the specialized team, that's a team of 5, we just dedicated on managing all the new leads and following them up together with directors, but then also putting these RFQs together, putting the track record together, selecting the right projects and the CVs of the right team members and any other kind of methodology statements and compliance kind of elements. That is a lot of work, and has been getting more bureaucratic, if you like. So that's what we need a specialist team for. But the bulk of the work is also done by people who are directors and associate directors, who are, of course, delivering projects at the same time and are designers and team leaders, and not 100% dedicated to acquisition. But we expect from any of our major leaders to bring in work.
Yeah. How have you managed to streamline then this process of entering competitions? Do you reuse ideas from competition to competition? So it's not kind of like, I know when I worked at RSHP for many years and was on a competition team there, and a similar sort of thing where they'd be entering 9, 10 competitions a year, had to win 1 or 2 of them. Obviously, winning 1 or 2 of them kind of funds the activity, but it became quite streamlined in the sense that there was a skyscraper in Sydney that didn't get realized, and let's just reuse the ideas again and place it here. Well, it wasn't as quite as cut and paste as that, but
It's not literally that, but we have an internal wealth of references. Of course, we're saying, and in the end, every project is unique with respect to place and purpose. But sometimes the programs are similar. I mean, of course, it's never a full repeat, but we have, and we always explore many ideas in each project. So we have multiple teams starting and browsing through potentials. I look at that and together with the directors and so on, to hit the mark with the right level of ambition and what fits and what has an element of novelty as well. So yes, we have a large repertoire. So if we have something very nice and well developed, and for some reason the project doesn't go through and is a non-win, we keep it in our stock of potential ideas, and something very similar comes around, we might look at it, but it's never it's never a repeat. And also these things have a kind of sell by date, as it were. You can't go back too far because we're onto something new. But yeah, definitely. So that helps to be doing so many competitions per year. I think I actually don't have the statistics on top of my head, but it could be easily 30, 40 competitions.
Wow. You've spoken in the past about the need for architects to be entrepreneurs. In your view, what entrepreneurial mindsets or structures do you think are lacking in most of today's firms, or in many of today's firms?
I don't know. I think that's a lot of it is an environment. So if you work in Europe, there is not much space for innovation, because I think the market is not really an open market for even developers and clients. It's way too much prescribed. And if for instance, in London in particular, if you go into areas of residential or mixed use, if you like, the constraints are so much and the prescriptions so deeply formulated already from the planning side of things, that there is not much for the developer even to innovate on the product side, or together with the architect develop very innovative solutions. I have the feeling, I mean, the kinds of things we're doing, we can't land here. And if you know that already, then on the side of the product and the vision, it's not as experimental and entrepreneurial, let's say, as it is kind of discouraged, and you can't land. You know what lands here in commerce, something which is quite conservative and predictable. So that is a bit, I think, the way I see the lack of entrepreneurship rooted in the political, over politicized domain of development. Because it's so much pressure on development, there's more prevention than permission, if you like, and then that feeds back into those projects which have a chance that these are approached very cautiously by everybody, so that these are all safe, trying to be as safe as possible. They're never safe bets in London. I mean, we have a project here in the Vauxhall cluster, which has been going on for years. If it was in China, it would have been long finished and completed and occupied, and we haven't. We're still going around in circles. We had planning at one point, but then COVID hit. But the plan to get to this planning point was 4 years, and then COVID hit, and the investors had to rethink. That happens also with this kind of slowness of planning, is that it takes so long that the market conditions have shifted, and then the whole project is not even worth pursuing, even if you get planning, or they have to restart and reapply because the product mix that in mind is no longer viable. So that's where I see a lot of the origin of the lack of entrepreneurship in the political environment, development environment, and you have more degrees of freedom and more let's say openness in China and in the Middle East than you have in Europe. In the US, it's also quite restrained often. I mean, not politically, but it's the climate as well. We did some nice things in America, but we would love to do more.
And that's interesting in China and in the Middle East, like there's less kind of cultural baggage, if you like, or there's less bureaucracy that's kind of accumulated over a long period of time, and things appear to get done much faster.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I understand that you have a very mature city like London with lots of stakeholders and lots of people worrying about what is coming, and a lot of people having opinions. I respect and understand that. I still think that the balance should be struck a little bit more in favor of clients, developers, architects to be more self-determining with respect to the product, because we are also, I mean, this team, in particular developers, also taking the risk of the marketing and selling the product, so they should also have the freedom to explore what would be the most value for that side.
Mm-hmm. In terms of your work in the Middle East and in Asia, how would you describe the efficiencies or the market conditions there comparatively, and its growth on your business?
Well, I mean, it's very rapid. So I nearly feel that sometimes in China, the demand for finishing a concept and then the SDDD, etc., detailed design, it's incredibly rapid, and they want to go on site extremely fast. So that is nearly breakneck and sometimes too much. I mean, we're managing it. Sometimes we have delivered a whole museum within 1 year from the first hello to the handing over at the opening, a science fiction museum in Chengdu, for instance. This is really unusual. It looks great. I mean, somehow we managed it, but it is very stressful, of course, and you have to run everybody massive overtime, and something has to give, which is oftentimes on the budget. So these, but in generally, I mean, it's. I prefer something which takes 5-6 years to something which takes 10 to 15 years. And of course, so if it's a complex, large project, 5 or 6 years is a good timing. In the end, it takes like that. I wish there was more appreciation at the beginning from a client side, what the required periods would be, so that we're not kind of continuously chased and running up deadlines which cannot be perhaps not be met. I mean, unless you have something super hard, like there's a kind of science fiction conference you have to meet, or Olympic Games, then we always we managed to deliver also. But it is too breakneck perhaps, but I much prefer that to something which is dragged out and drawn out in ways which are frustrating, where you also, the people who are working on it is a longer 3 generations of different people trying to relearn the same projects and trying to go around in a circle. That's often the case in Europe, and we have some projects in Italy. We started them. We're literally working on them now, going on site. The original competition was 25 years ago. I mean, I'm not joking. And some projects took 15 years, 20 years, etc. So that is kind of disheartening. So China is too fast. Middle East is also is more realistic, let's say. No unnecessary delays, but also not pushing everybody too hard. When then also mistakes happen, if it has to go too fast.
How do you as a business have to adapt yourself, or how have you adapted to working in these new cultures? Because they're obviously you're describing they're going at a totally different speed. There's less bureaucracy. Imagine somewhere like China. There's you've got challenges with language. I don't know what the role is as you as a business, what you have to do in terms of setting yourself up. Do you set yourself up with a satellite office? Do you have to partner with locals? I know sometimes in the Middle East, that's depending on what the project is. How does the business structure have to change? How have you had to adapt? What sorts of things do you have to put into place to be able to work in these new territories?
In China, we have set up offices. So we have a big office in Beijing. We had up to 70 people. We've reduced it slightly now. We also opened a new office in Shenzhen recently, and we have a Hong Kong office. So 3 offices operating in Southeast Asia and East Asia. We also, from there we're going on to Southeast Asia from the Hong Kong office, etc. So that was very important. And to build up a team, I mean, most of them came from London. So actually, we have a lot of Chinese students. I've been teaching for 30 years at the A in London. And we have students from around the world, and these students help us to make contact, speak the language, and help us to export back to these countries. So this is also with people from India. Now we explore the Indian market, which is maturing, and we can start doing things. So as well as in Latin America, we have a lot of people from as well as US citizens. So we have people from everywhere, and we use them to go back into these markets, so they have some kind of home advantage, some knowledge, speak the language, and we set up offices. We've done that also in Europe. We had for a long time we had an office in Rome. We'd had a lot of work in Italy. We had an office in Hamburg. We had an office in New York in our building, and which we done with Related. But then if the market doesn't develop, if there's not enough new work coming, then we also close some of these offices. So we no longer have the Hamburg office. We recently reopened the Berlin office. So yes, we have to do that, and it makes a lot of sense to have people on the ground, not everywhere. We had for a while, we had an office in Dubai as well, in the design district. And yes, that's definitely the way forward. And we do work with local partner firms. I mean, we have full delivery capacity in England and in Europe. We've done that. We have very experienced architects and can go all the way. We can also do general planners, where we take all the consultants under our wing and managing large projects. So we have very, very mature and top people with a lot of experience to deliver large projects and manage large projects. But in China and in some territories, we work with these local design institutes, and particular when it comes down to the construction documents and the site supervision proper. We rely on the local partners, but we have continue and follow up and work with them, check drawings and update the 3D models sometimes even, and we also do so-called artistic control. You very care about the product, the final results. When we do mock-ups and when things become to the point where the final surfaces, exterior and interior, we need to be there and control the product and hand over the product to the client. But the bulk of responsibility in terms of the technical work is that at that point with the local funds. We go a bit shorter than the American companies. The American companies withdraw quicker and leave it, I think, let it more be completed by locals. We have slightly different product with has a bit more, is less generic, and therefore we can't be easily substituted when it comes to kind of the nuances of deciding on details, materials, etc.
So you maintain a kind of design concept guardian position throughout the entire process, and then when you hand over to a local architect, there'd be a smaller team on your side that would be assuring
Yeah,
quality
absolutely.
control and that everything is being done in alignment. That actually sounds like quite a very efficient way of scaling your business, actually.
Oh, that's very important. Yes. That's very good to scale, and but it's also important that we don't consume the reputation we've built up
Mhm.
by overselling what we're doing and not following it up, and then getting questionable results. So we're very conscientious on the level of quality control.
How do you select the architects to partner with in local places? Do you run competitions, or is it through your own networks and people that you know out there, or people's work that you followed?
Mostly our own network. There are some major companies we can go around different places in China. There are some regions and cities where it's better to rely on locals and work with the local dominant LDIs. They're mostly state-owned companies. And so you rely a lot on knowledge. And when we have competitions, there sometimes we've been asked by several, or we have several options. We look out, we also negotiate the fee split, etc. at this point. But we're also appraising which team or which partner gives us the greatest chance of winning. And for that, we have acquired a lot of knowledge because we've been in the market for over 20 years with a lot of people on the ground and a lot of experience. And the players are the same players nearly. There's not been a major new player. And so we have done several projects with many of them.
Amazing. It's very interesting. You've kind of developed a specialism, if you like, at being able to work with these. I mean, they're more than emerging markets now, but they're whilst a lot of people were kind of would be focused on working domestically, you've done very well at being able to identify and be involved with these kind of emerging markets where there's a level of there's more freedom in many ways, like you're talking about. There's less bureaucracy. How is it economically in somewhere like China? That's a new form of state capitalism, if you like. How does it work with
Yeah.
you guys? How free and open is it?
I mean, it's been very, very good. First of all, the competitions have been very well paid, so more than anywhere else. So even though we spend mostly, we have been spending a bit more than we getting back, but we're getting back maybe 80%, 90% sometimes. Sometimes even make a profit. Similarly, Saudi was like this, where they had paid well competitions, so to get the best firms to compete and do their best, and you get the resources. That's been great. It's been recently when China market was kind of crowding, too much competition from everywhere, and the clients and their money was kind of a bit getting tight. They had imposed new rules where to get on the shortlist, you have to do inverted commas sketches. The competition then means that the sketches are full presentations with photorealistic renderings, nearly the full project just to get on the shortlist. Then you have 100 of them bring that forward. Track record loses a bit of its cachet. So that's been tough. We still been winning, but it took us more, and we had to invest much more to stay in the market under these conditions. So that's been the recent few years. But overall, I would say, because of the speed of the projects, the scale of the projects, even if the percentage fees are relatively small compared to what you might get here in London, overall economically it's been very well. I mean, if we compare our, I mean, we have a total of over 500 staff. Of course, there's some overhead staff and support staff, but if you compare the income or the turnover generated by our staff compared to companies we know of similar scale who are operating mostly, for instance, in London, surprisingly, our income is much higher. Even though the fees are lower, it's just the volume, the speed through which we go through these projects. And the front end fees are relatively good still, and we can manage also the caliber of people we need in terms of professionalism is slightly less. So we can do these works with and run these jobs as maybe younger people with less experience because the bureaucracy and the demands of professional project management and it's less onerous. Also in terms of correspondence, this is more WeChat exchanges with client representatives, and it's more informal still. This is of course similarly in the Middle East or in also I know this from places we used to be in Russia or in places like Kazakhstan, Iraq, various North African countries. It's much less bureaucratic, much less red tape, and so it's more intuitive. And because the client themselves aren't necessarily, or their representatives have this kind of very, very sophisticated level of project management, you have to kind of live up to in a place like England. So it was a good fit, also for me personally, to engage with let's say tycoons and heads of states and mayors. I mean, you get more access directly to decision makers because the architecture is very important for them for creating something for their city, for this nation building, city building, if you. And but it all the way through, it's slightly less onerous, and you can do something. I mean, when we get out of the gate and started in China and the Middle East, when we were mushrooming from let's say 35 to 450 people in 3-4 years. I mean, we couldn't have done that in Europe, not only because the volume of work wasn't there, but we couldn't have gotten this job or done these jobs because of the requirement of professionalism, let's say. In the meantime, we of course matured a lot, and we have these the respective expertise, but not necessarily on the scale. You know, there were top group of 25, 50 people who have that, but not the next 100. But the next 100, they can go out to some of these places and if they have the cultural fit and can talk to the developer, it's in a healthy sense a little bit more informal and based on handshakes to some extent and trust.
Yeah.
Than you would have to the way it operates here. I mean, I'm sure it's here also. He's also handshakes and trust, but it's easier, and so it shows up that per head we're doing financially very well.
Do you see in the future that some of these markets, the Middle East, China, that might follow in the direction that the European markets have gone, where they become much more heavily regulated and bureaucratic? And do you see that Europe could go the other way, that it could become less regulated and become more open?
Well, it should become much more open, I think, from the point of view of planning. I mean, I've been on this kind of all-party parliamentary group for leveling up infrastructure investment and housing, and sitting with people who want to bring investment into the UK, and as well as developers, some planners, some architects, some think tankers, and I mean, there's been a kind of real frustration, you know, of so-called planning paralysis, that things don't move, things are not happening. There's unclarity about certain rules. There was this fire here of a tower burning down, and there's still no clarity about the new rules completely, and a lot of environmental pressure, so-called neutrality, which prevents projects basically and delays projects. So they have people, big investment groups saying we believe in principle in the UK and in the market, we would love to invest, but we can't place our money. There's not, the projects aren't moving. So there's a big frustration. At the same time, there's outcry that we have this enormous housing crisis where prices for residential properties are way too high, and that in the end prevents the city to grow, and people have to make compromises with their careers, maybe try to move to Birmingham or to the outskirts of London to find places, and then they have to commute, or they set up their business. They're less well connected because it's just becoming too expensive in the center. There's a supply crunch, and I think it's very bad for the overall economy. And so I hope that this will open up. I don't have much hope under the current government, actually. Although they're also making gestures, everybody understands it somehow. But central government often has been the force which was trying to open up because they take the overall view. But local government, local municipalities and boroughs are very much entrenched, and there the political forces are more in favor of prevention, this kind of NIMBYism. And the central government has sometimes tried to kind of overrule this and reach through and help some projects along on the mayor's side or even on the central government side. but it's difficult, even if so even if central government complains, this system can no longer be made agile. And to some extent, I don't see that in China. And I do see a maturing, that they also become a bit more demanding with paperwork and etc. But not much. And we're now exploring India as a new market, which is again relatively informal, of course. So I don't think they will, in my lifetime, for our company, they will reach that level, let's say, of difficulty and level of bureaucracy which we have to face here. No, I don't see that. Although it's gradually also happening, gradual ramping up, but ratcheting up, but it's very slowly. Not. We're still in a different ballgame.
Are there any negatives or constraints to working in these more kind of liberal or unregulated markets or freer markets?
It's good to have a more easygoing and formal way of working, so you can have young and less experienced people just making things happen. But there's also this element that sometimes, and we've seen it, I mean, this was most expressed in the Dubai boom up to 2008, that the clients took on so much and they didn't have the managerial capacity to properly manage their projects, and that also becomes a problem. So if it's too much management heavy, then that every line has to be documented in 5 places. But if there's no enough managerial capacity, then you don't get decisions, and or clients are inexperienced and guide you in the wrong direction, and then already that's not going to sustain. You try to argue, no, they want you to try this, try that, in the end. So you're also wasting time and effort if there's too little experience on the client side and too little capacity, managerial capacity. So there's a sweet spot there. We are certainly here on a way too much, and in some conditions we wish they had a bit more experience and managerial kind of acumen and capacity.
How do you kind of qualify a suitable client for you, particularly a client coming from somewhere in the Far East that perhaps you've not come across before, you don't know what they're about, and they might be really inexperienced, and that comes with its own set of risks for you engaging with them as an organization. and even just in terms of trust and different ways that people do business and get paid. For example, I mean, the Middle East notoriously in the past has been, and they've had a different way of paying people in many cases, and there weren't in the past the same sorts of courts and arbitration things that you could rely on. How do you protect against? How do you qualify to make sure it's the right client and de-risk yourself?
Yeah, I mean, since we have a kind of more leads than we can take up, we weed out those clients we feel dodgy, they don't have a track record, or we can see that the project, the way it's been set up, is maybe unrealistic. They have unrealistic timelines and budgets. Then we don't even look at it further, or we explore further, and we sometimes then go with heavy upfront payments, immobilization
Right.
fees. So to be on the safe side, we sometimes even ask for letters of credit if we know that the client is politically volatile and they find it hard to prove payments. And then we've created this, for instance, for a place like Iraq, which is politically very fraught or complex. We made such arrangements. So yes, we have experienced leaders in our company who know how to set up the project and de-risk it. If we decide to go forward anyway, even though there might be some kind of uncertainties, then we kind of de-risk it in ways like that. So yeah, we're quite experienced on that. We also have different characters. I'm more gung-ho and say, let's try it, let's go for it. I mean, that's the way we get some of our jobs done, like the Baku project in Azerbaijan. It was, we were approached obliquely, and there was a lot of things unclear, but I took a dive, and in the end, I mean, soon after, I was in a one-to-one with the president in his private compound. But we took a risk. We did sketches and so on. It was a promise by this character who came to us to London, and in the end, it was me, the president, and that person who brought me in, and we unfolded the sketches, and he loved it, and we went on from there. So I'm kind of a risk taker in this sense, and I also like situations where you explore new territories and people who might not have a track record yet, but somehow have charisma. And others in the company are more cautious, and the overall balance of risk taking, since we have so many opportunities now, we're slightly less adventurous when it comes to unknown places, unknown clients, with maybe dubious promises. We probably won't go, but we might miss out on some opportunities.
So there's a healthy appetite and tolerance for risk under
Yeah.
your leadership, what they do.
Yeah, that's true. That's what I am.
You mentioned earlier that you've been in education for the last 30 years, and you've been teaching at the AA for a long time. And I know that you've spoken about the dangers of architectural education becoming very politicized at the moment, and very kind of having a very distinct ideological narrative. And my own experience in architecture school, I was at the Bartlett, and it was interesting when you come out of the environment that you suddenly realize that the world is a much bigger, broader place with differing perspectives and differing political views. What is your kind of stance on where architectural education is going in terms of its ideological narratives? There's an enormous amount of activism that the profession is, and this is kind of a bit frustrating on our side here at Business of Architecture. We work with a lot of, we have a business consulting agency, and many times I'll see lots of architects who are really gung-ho with some form of activism. Okay, great, that's fine. However, like, you can't afford to do it because you've got no money, and the business aspects, the profit aspects, the money side of it has just been negated. And I find that very troubling, that a lot of activism supersedes kind of business health in many cases. What's your sort of take on the state of architecture education?
Well, I mean, you put your finger on it. I mean, it's basically the Vogue takeover has been nearly complete. I mean, there are some islands and some kind of studios and teaching arenas at the A, at the Bartlett. I mean, it's a minority who are
Mhm.
doing interesting work, innovative work, and where students can actually learn to develop complex projects which enable them to come then out into the world and work for major firms or join the competition. At least on that level, they do like great competition entries when they in their final projects. They do projects which could win competitions.
Mhm.
If not the kind of knowing how to fully on the constructability side pull them through, but on the design side of things, so now the tools, rendering and animating and 3D walkthrough environments, so you get all the way with large complex projects. And in a lot of the schools of architecture, this is even kind of sneered at. Oh, this is, they don't want to even do renderings because they think it's commercialized, that if you don't render your work, you don't, and only show me abstract drawings or sketches, you don't know what you're designing. I mean, you haven't completed your design. And so rendering is a way of completing the design, but it's also the way of communicating your design to audiences, even to yourself, because I don't think you know what you're proposing if you only have some pencil sketches. And it's just not up to date. So, but it's really then the pencil sketches plus some kind of ideological voiceover, which is often a little bit adolescent, or you're dabbling in arenas where our discipline and profession is not empowered to dabble in, and or we're looking at projects where the urgency of basic infrastructure provision and just more resources to have larger spaces and basic sanitation or something like this. That's what these arenas need. They don't need architects, conceptualizations, etc. And you wouldn't these therefore in these kind of, let's say, territories where the overall economic development and productivity levels are not developed, there was no way that resources there would actually be spent on fees to professional teams.
Mhm.
And anyway, the solutions are self-evident, nearly.
Yeah.
So the students working on projects they will never be facing later. So they will do kinds of projects which are never they will never be tasked with if they work actually as architects, and that is also a problem. So I understand the let's say idealism and motivation to some extent, and it is also, I think, connected with the fact that a lot of teachers are not working in the field,
Mhm.
are more academics, and they then bring their academic discourse to the students and let the students participate in that. But it's a bit artificial because in the end, I mean, some of this, of course, if you're very eloquent in 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 some of the DEI discourses, they will also have a degree of cachet with planning departments or with community projects, etc. So it's not that they learn nothing, because it has escaped the university as a general kind of currency. But again, it's not getting to the heart of the development requirements of a big city for the knowledge economy. And so in so it doesn't enable the students. It doesn't empower the students ultimately. And for us company, we cannot hire from this pool of students because they don't have develop the skills or don't have demonstrate their ability to solve complex design tasks and visualize them. So we can only hire from our own, basically, students. But it's not only me. There's a few others in our company, many others in our company who are teaching, and so there's enough happening I don't know if it's 5% or 10% in schools of architecture, which hasn't gone down this route, and we can therefore find new graduates. We mostly teaching them ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's detrimental to the profession at large, because architects or people are coming out of universities ill prepared for professional practice. I would, on a slightly cynical note, perhaps make an argument as well that the universities themselves are businesses, and that they've got bums they got to get bums on seats, and sometimes they play to something that's ideological and easy to sell. And again, I appreciate and I'm empathetic to the motivations in some cases. I'm in alignment with you there about it's often misplaced, and it's not necessarily preparing young architects for the profession. And then on the other side, when architects graduate, part ones, part twos, well, they struggle with the low salaries. And part of the reason that the low salary is there is because, well, you don't have any skills that are useful for a business.
Yes, that's very true. And I mean, the other thing which I've been criticizing, so it's also that universities and critics, I mean, it's similarly with architectural critics, have gone in this direction, moralizing and and looking at small projects, community projects, for instance, prizes in architecture, going to very small interventions, young teams who have some kind of story about, um, let's say, community engagement. And but again, this is looking at the margins and overlooking the real tasks and the bigger achievements. They're then kind of written off. Well, also major architects have not been invited to the Venice Biennale for many years. The recent Biennale was actually very refreshing. It was a new start for me. But why I'm talking about this, because universities and architecture prizes, as well as biennales, etc., this is a discourse which should support and critique the bulk of what's going on, or the leading edge of major developments. And if these major developments are not looked at, but when looks at some kind of slum somewhere else, or then these major developments, the bulk of what our leading firms are creating, is bereft of critical discussion. And so we're adrift. That's why I'm saying we're nearly becoming like a craft, because that critical discourse and engagement through exhibitions and biennales, through lectures at academia, where we also are not invited, as you know. And so we then kind of we're left, and also the critics, we already know, they just hate what we're doing. They've written us off because we're doing big things and we're neoliberal, and therefore we are kind of in a vacuum. I mean, everything that goes on really in the terms of urban development and major projects is a kind of critical vacuum, and therefore is no longer, and that's bad for these developments. And you can become you make up your own story, and it's unchallenged. The other thing I wanted to, in this respect, is also that the sustainability discourse, not so much at universities, there it's also quite large, and biennales, etc., where it is there, but in terms of professional conferences or even real estate events, etc., it's nearly the only topic which is put on an agenda, and every presentation over focuses on this. And I've been critical on that as well, because it is not the fundamental motivations and purposes of why we do projects and how we should do them. We know, yes, we should do it with the minimized carbon footprint and minimized energy consumption is its own rationale anyway for saving running and maintenance costs. So these are cost side of arguments are so foregrounded that the actual benefit and opportunity arguments are swamped out. I mean, it's convenient because you have in a very safe territory, and you can make your statements, but it's also, I say, to a larger part of this also engineering intelligence. So it is really a kind of strange takeover of academia and Biennale, etc., of the critical discourse of architecture coming from supporting milieus of media and biennales and universities has gone vogue, but let's say the core professional discourse has gone sustainability only, and therefore we have no proper discussion of these projects and the other agendas and innovation agendas we could bring to this discipline. How we, for instance, I'm very interested in the knowledge economy and questions of density and densification, where I believe we need more degrees of freedom for co-location synergies to be built, and how we design towards this, how we're designing adaptively, how do you designing in ways that this complexity remains legible and perceptually tractable, and how do you generate an urban identity. There's things like the phenomenological project, the semiological projects. What are the how does architecture speak and express the institutions it houses, and how do you support navigations? There's many issues, and how do you design these kind of clusters for the knowledge economy? And there's so much you should discuss: organizational strategies of interpenetration of domains, of overlap conditions, of gradual in-betweening between spaces, positive, negative spaces. They have this kind of so many repertoires and so many topics in my lectures or in the discourse, which we had much more rich. That this is all crowded out because there's only one topic, which is sustainability. And that should come after we've kind of discovered what we should build. Then we can also say, okay, how does the sustainability agenda and the knowledge we've gained make sure that this what we're building here is also is light-footed when it comes to carbon and the environment. There's some aspect of the environmental discourse which, of course, is formative for morphology development of the urban morphology. That's what we're doing. We're interested in that. In terms of passive systems and sun exposure and so on and so forth. But again, it has to be this one topic.
It's more integrated, yeah.
The only topic, and that has been my other criticism of more of the discipline, which also has this element, because there's this kind of moralizing element. This is so much high on the agenda, and this is something, if we don't focus all our energy on that, then we're somewhat kind of deficient. But I'm saying, well, still you have to discuss what we're going to build and why. And if we wanted to just cost reduce and do the most for the environment, maybe we should build less altogether. And then we're ending with this kind of degrowth agenda, which I think if that would become, but we know that this is the degrowth agenda would politically be very, very dangerous. I mean, if you remember the yellow vests, I mean, there is enough. I mean, some of these ideologies presume that we are too wealthy. We can kind of we can exist with much less and be nice to each other. But that's the thing. I mean, the economy we can live and continue if we're stagnating. There's a lot of productivity gains in different parts of the society and technology. We, for instance, become much more productive over the years. We're seeing by a factor of 10 and many other businesses, but the overall per capita productivity and income has been stagnating. So all these extra productivity gains have been frittered away through other means of redistributing and making it easier to survive and being helped and being looked after, etc., and taking it easy on the job. There where it all goes, and that's fine. But if it would slide into the negative territory, if we would become poorer every year, I think this would be very, very dangerous. I mean, I don't like the fact that we're not exploiting these new technologies and productivity potentials for a much better life, because you can, if now we're growing about at maximum 0.5% per annum across Europe roughly, and that's mostly kind of representing top population growth. So per capita income is stagnating, and you can live like this. Japan has been living like this for 30 years, with actually per capita income reduction. Very, if it's extremely slow and imperceptible. So you can live like this, but it's a big shame because I would love to see, a huge kind of shift forward in the next 20, 30 years that we have doubling and tripling average income and the degrees of freedom and have more to invest, etc. That's my vision. And so I think that the woke thing in our field and the sustainability emphasis and then everything safe and let's not upset anybody, that kind of anti-entrepreneurial spirit will not allow us to do that. And that's why Europe is very different from the US. US is still growing, 2%, 2.5%, let's say 5 times as fast as Europe. And Europe just, we don't have any leaders in the tech world, whether any social media or tech companies or AI companies. And that's also part of these kind of overregulation. And they recently have put in another kind of set of restrictions on the internet. So that's what we're facing up here in Europe. The opposite, unfortunately, of an environment which encourages entrepreneurship. But we can sit here and be entrepreneurs
Around the world.
everywhere else.
Yeah.
For that, London is still a good place to sit.
Just working in other locations. It's really interesting. Why do you think that the architecture profession has gone in this particular direction and has a focus on this kind of ideology and concern with sustainability as opposed to it being a more integrated conversation? Is it architects? Do we feel guilty of being an architect and privilege, or?
I mean, architects, first of all, there's a certain inertia. You have the kind of more left orientation in all academic disciplines. Architects were also when it comes to we still were in the 60s and 70s, so a lot of government jobs. There's a kind of nostalgia for that. And when the takeoff came in the 80s, 90s of business entrepreneurship, and some architects went along with this, but it was kind of a bit against the grain. There was worry about commercialization, about superficiality, about so there's all academic disciplines have that, except economists have that slightly kind of socialist left orientation. And then the whole woke thing is of course it was something fresh and interesting, and you can learn quickly about it and you can empower yourself about it, but you could also you also have to catch up with it. So it is something which is not only confined to architects. It's been across the board in all domains, even in mathematicians have been affected by this, even though they seem to be less scope. And of course in architecture you have a lot of scope. You have social housing, and you have community, and there's been always, when it comes to land and development, similar as with health, the legitimacy of private actors is slightly more suspect than when it comes to car manufacturing or the manufacturing of other goods and services. So there's been a kind of even more than average let's say susceptibility to this.
How do you manage this conversation inside of the firm, inside of your own business?
So we actually been quite late to this because we have been working around the place. I mean, and we have 60 nations in our company, and we have so we have a few Americans, a few very, very few actually English and a handful of German. But once you go into Italy and Spain already, or Greece, but certainly if you go into China, India, Latin America, these cultures they're less affected, right, inherently. And if they go back, first of all, they haven't been infected sufficiently, and they came maybe studied with me rather than elsewhere, and we have never made this a topic, and we've focused on our let's say frontier innovation agendas. And then so they're not infected by this, and if they would go back into their home territories, nobody would understand them if they wanted to push these agendas. They would just fall on deaf ears, and that's what you see. I've seen anecdotes where an American came to a Chinese university trying to push some of these agendas. I mean, it just goes nowhere. So we're a little bit different as a company to begin with. Eventually, yes, while this whole DEI thing is waning already, and it had got so much backlash, and it's no longer on the ascendance, we finally came around that we wanted to have some kind of process. And but we're doing because there were voices in the company, and understand that. So to catch up with the industry and so on and so forth, so we actually having a process which we shifted into a general cultural upgrade of collaboration, of if there's too much hierarchy and too much silos, and empowering younger staff, and we introduced a mentoring scheme, so it doesn't have the DEI label and actually topics, but that's the way it came in initially, that we wanted to do something, and we had some consultants we've added. So we have some kind of internal cultural upgrading process, which we should have anyway, and makes a lot of sense, and where I'm quite involved together with the CEO, with Ujan Majidi, and quite a few others. And so it's good. We have a good process, which we're doing our own thing, instead of having a DEI process, although it started there somehow. And then we shifted it to something more general. And I thought, if we are investing a lot of energy and time in internal surveys and processes and mechanisms to upgrade our culture, then it can't be just these marginal issues, which I don't think really exist much in our company. I mean, this whole idea of discrimination. I mean, we have 60 nations, and I don't know who would be the discriminators. We are all from other places. We don't even have a single, very, very few people from England or from the Anglo-Saxon realm. And where do you how do you classify people? If you're talking about Eastern Europeans versus West Europeans, versus, it's difficult. So we gave up on that very, very quickly, or it did, but the initiative was there, and we made something I believe very productive and out of it, and redirected the kind of cultural upgrade discourse inside the company. So I'm very satisfied with that.
Amazing. I think that's probably the perfect place for us to conclude the conversation. We've come up to time there. But Patrik, that was amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show and telling us a little bit behind the scenes of Zaha Hadid Architects, and giving us your views on the profession and its future. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. My pleasure.
Ownership transitions don't fail because of bad contracts. They fail because of unspoken tension, mismatched visions, and rushed handoffs. Our guide spills the secrets behind smooth, stress-free transitions from real-world firm exits. It's like prenuptial counseling for your business. Way less awkward, way more profitable. Grab your free copy at businessofarchitecture.com/transition-ready. We'd like to acknowledge the following smart practice firms who have achieved 200 Club status. These firms have demonstrated exceptional client service and operations management to achieve a financial performance measure of $200,000 of revenue per full-time employee equivalent through the proper combination of people, process, and profit. To find out more about this prestigious award and how you can apply for recognition, go to businessofarchitecture.com/200. On our list, we have Drew and Justin Tyndall, Mark Elster and Joey Osborne, Brad Hubble and Susan Daly, Frank and Megan Lynn, Judy and Larry Apel, Chris Smart, and Justin Kimmick. Thank you to our recent listeners who left reviews for the podcast on iTunes. Your reviews help others find this podcast so the rising tide raises all boats. To be acknowledged on the show, open up the podcast app on your iPhone, search for Business of Architecture, and after clicking on the show, scroll all the way to the bottom and leave a review.
Today's episode is sponsored by Gelt. Is your architecture firm just filing taxes or actually using them to grow the business? Gelt is your partner in optimizing your taxes so you can focus on scale. They work with you year-round, not just at tax time, taking a proactive approach that combines expert CPAs and powerful technology. From smart entity structures to overlooked deductions and smarter compensation planning, Gelt helps architecture firms unlock strategies most accountants miss. And exclusively for Business of Architecture listeners, Gelt is offering 10% off your first year. Don't wait for next tax season. Schedule your complimentary consultation at joingelt.com. That's JOINGELT.com to learn more and mention BOA when you sign up.
Today's episode of the Business of Architecture Show is sponsored by Smart Practice TM, the world's leading step-by-step solution for architectural practice owners that want to structure their existing practice so the complexity of business doesn't get in the way of the architecture. Because you see, it likely isn't your architecture skills that hold you back. It's the business aspects of running a practice, managing projects and people, dealing with clients, contractors, and money. So if you're ready to quit being a glorified administrator and get back to architecture again, go to smartpracticemethod.com to discover the proven, simple, and easy to implement Smart Practice Method that is revolutionizing firm management for owners and teams. Rion Willard here, and I'd like to thank you, of course, for joining us today and remind you that the views expressed on this show by our guests do not necessarily represent those of the host, and we make no representation, promise, guarantee, pledge, warranty, contract, bond, or commitment except to help you conquer the world. Carpe diem.